the frozen waters off the coast of Japan, engineers are building a wall of ice nearly a mile long, buried 30 meters deep into the earth. This is not a drill for the distant future. This is happening right now, around one of the most dangerous nuclear sites on the planet. What happens when the only thing standing between radioactive water and the Pacific Ocean is a frozen barrier that must never be allowed to thaw? Context: in one breath, on March 11, 2011, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan, triggering a tsunami that devastated the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. 3 reactors melted down in one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. The plant sits less than a kilometer from the ocean, and since that day, groundwater has been flowing through the damaged reactor buildings, becoming contaminated with radioactive materials before seeping toward the sea. By 2013, Japan's government and the Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, faced a crisis that wouldn't stop. Every day, roughly 300 tons of groundwater moved through the site. Engineers needed a solution that could hold back an invisible enemy: radiation dissolved in water, flowing constantly through cracked concrete and soil. The answer they proposed sounded like science fiction: an underground frozen wall, the largest of its kind ever attempted. Timeline of key events: the Fukushima disaster began at 2:46 p.m. on March 11, 2011. When the earthquake cut power to the plant's cooling systems, the tsunami arrived 40 minutes later, flooding backup generators and sealing the reactor's fate. Within 72 hours, all 3 active reactor cores had melted through their containment vessels. In the weeks that followed, TEPCO scrambled to cool the melting fuel by pumping in seawater, but this created a new problem. The water became highly radioactive and began pooling in basements and trenches throughout the complex. Some of it leaked directly into the Pacific. By April 2011, TEPCO admitted that contaminated water was reaching the ocean, though the full scale wouldn't be clear for years. Source: TEPCO Incident Reports, April 2011. IAEA Situation Updates. The immediate crisis consumed the world's attention, but a slower catastrophe was unfolding underground. Fukushima Daiichi had been built on a coastal aquifer, and every day groundwater flowed naturally downhill from the mountains toward the sea, passing directly beneath the reactor buildings. Engineers realized that this flow was picking up cesium-137, strontium-90, and tritium before continuing its journey to the ocean. Storage tanks began filling faster than new ones could be built. Lower third daily groundwater inflow estimate 300-400 tons by 2013. Public pressure mounted when TEPCO confirmed that radioactive groundwater had been leaking into the ocean continuously since the disaster. Japan's government stepped in, pledging financial support for an ambitious engineering project: a frozen soil barrier that would encircle the 4 damaged reactor buildings in a rectangle measuring 1,500 meters in length. The concept was borrowed from mining and tunnel construction, but never attempted at this scale or for this duration. Source: Japanese government announcement, September 2013. Question: how do you freeze soil underground without ever letting it thaw? Construction began in June 2014 with a price tag that would eventually reach 35 billion yen, roughly $300 million USD. Workers drilled 1,568 holes into the ground, each about 30 meters deep, spaced 1 meter apart in a continuous perimeter. Into each hole, they installed a pipe filled with brine coolant chilled to -30 degrees Celsius. Refrigeration units the size of shipping containers pumped the sub-zero liquid through 30 kilometers of underground piping. The goal was to freeze the soil into an impermeable barrier that groundwater couldn't cross. Visual: cross-section diagram showing pipe depth, frozen soil layer, and groundwater flow arrows. The system went operational in stages between 2016 and 2017, but results came slowly. By June 2016, TEPCO reported that sections of the wall had not fully frozen. Sensors showed gaps where water temperature remained above zero. The company added more refrigeration capacity and adjusted the coolant flow, but the wall's effectiveness remained uncertain. Critics pointed out that flowing groundwater carries heat, making it harder to freeze soil in high-flow zones. Source: TEPCO Technical Reports, 2016-2017. Nuclear Regulation Authority Inspection Records. Evidence and Verification. TEPCO publishes daily measurements of groundwater levels, radiation concentrations, and frozen wall temperatures on its website. though independent verification is limited. According to company data, the ice wall has reduced groundwater inflow into the reactor buildings from roughly 400 tons per day before construction to between 100 and 140 tons per day after activation. Document TEPCO Monitoring Reports 2017 present. However, the wall has never achieved a complete freeze. Thermal sensors embedded in the soil show persistent problem areas, where temperatures hover near zero but don't solidify fully. TEPCO has supplemented the ice wall with additional measures, including pumping wells that intercept groundwater before it reaches the frozen barrier and grouting to seal gaps. Source: Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority Reviews, 2018 to 2019. The Japanese government's Agency for Natural Resources and Energy has defended the project, stating that the ice wall was always intended as one component of a multi-layered system, not a standalone solution. Official statements emphasize that no significant increase in ocean contamination has been detected since the wall's activation, based on seawater sampling conducted by TEPCO and independent labs. Source: ANRI Press Releases 2018-2020, Marine Monitoring Data. External scientists have raised questions about long-term viability. A 2017 report by an international panel convened by the IAEA noted that frozen soil barriers typically serve as temporary measures in construction projects, not permanent infrastructure requiring decades of continuous operation. The panel did not call for the wall's removal, but recommended ongoing evaluation of alternatives. Document IAEA Expert Mission Report 2017. Conflicting views and gaps. Some engineers argue that the ice wall was always a compromise, chosen partly for its public relations value because it sounded innovative and decisive. Alternative approaches, such as concrete slurry walls or complete excavation of contaminated soil, were considered but deemed too disruptive or expensive. Critics from Japan's nuclear opposition groups have characterized the ice wall as a band-aid that delays more fundamental solutions, though they acknowledge it has reduced water flow. Source: Statements from Citizens Nuclear Information Center 2016-2018. There's also uncertainty about what happens if refrigeration fails. TEPCO maintains backup power systems and redundant cooling units, but a prolonged power outage or equipment breakdown could cause sections of the wall to thaw within days. Company engineers state that even if the wall melted completely, other barriers like pumping wells and waterproof layers would continue to function, but no one has tested this scenario at full scale. The wall's impact on ocean contamination remains debated. While seawater tritium levels near the plant have stayed within government limits since 2017, some marine scientists note that tritium is difficult to filter and accumulates over time. Japan's 2021 decision to begin releasing treated water from storage tanks into the ocean, after removing most isotopes except tritium, has complicated the assessment, making it harder to isolate the ice wall's specific contribution. Source: Japanese government announcement on water release April 2021. Marine sampling by external research institutions. Info card. Confirmed. Groundwater flow reduced. Unconfirmed. Long-term structural integrity beyond 20 years. Human impact. The people of Fukushima Prefecture have lived with this invisible threat for over a decade. Fishermen who once made their living from these coastal waters have seen their industry collapse, not only from contamination, but from the stigma attached to any seafood labeled Fukushima. The ice wall was supposed to help restore confidence, a visible sign that the crisis was being contained. For some, it has offered reassurance. For others, it's a reminder that the problem is so severe it requires a frozen fortress to keep radiation at bay. Families evacuated from the exclusion zone continue to debate whether they can ever return. The ice wall does not make their homes habitable, but it represents one part of a larger decommissioning effort expected to take 30 to 40 years. Children who left as toddlers are now teenagers who've grown up in displacement, their sense of home frozen in time as surely as the soil around the reactors. Workers at the Fukushima site, numbering in the thousands, maintain the refrigeration system in shifts, checking pipes and sensors, replacing coolant, monitoring for leaks. They wear dosimeters and work in a landscape of concrete, steel, and ice, knowing that the wall beneath their feet is both an engineering marvel and a monument to a disaster that should never have happened. Expert Lens: Why It Matters to Understand the Ice Wall, Imagine trying to build a dam not in a river, but underground in soil that's like a sponge. Water doesn't flow in neat channels. It seeps through millions of tiny gaps. Freezing the soil turns those gaps into ice, creating a solid barrier. But if the ice melts even partially, water finds a way through, like a crack in a dam that spreads. The Fukushima ice wall matters beyond Japan because it tests the limits of what humans can do when we've lost control of nuclear technology. 30 years ago, Chernobyl was entombed in concrete. Fukushima's coastal location and groundwater made that impossible. Instead, engineers chose to wage a slow, cold war against nature itself, fighting the downhill flow of water with machines that must run every hour of every day. Sidebar: tritium, radioactive hydrogen that can't be easily filtered. Considered low risk but accumulates in water. This project also raises questions about precedent. If another coastal nuclear plant faces a similar crisis, will governments reach for the same solution? The ice wall has become a case study in crisis management, taught in engineering schools and debated in policy circles. It's a monument to human ingenuity and a warning about the costs of failure. Mini recap. Here's what we know for certain. The Fukushima ice wall is real, operational, and has reduced the amount of groundwater flowing through the damaged reactors. It costs millions of dollars per year to maintain and has never achieved a complete freeze. What we don't know is whether it will hold for the 30 years TEPCO says it needs, or what happens if it doesn't. The story is far from over, and the stakes couldn't be higher. What's next? Scenarios. In the near term, the ice wall will continue operating as is, with TEPCO making incremental adjustments to improve freezing in problem zones. Confidence level, high. The Japanese government has committed to the decommissioning timeline, and abandoning the wall now would mean immediate flooding of the reactor buildings. Over the next 5 to 10 years, engineers may develop supplementary systems, such as advanced grouting or deeper drainage wells to reduce dependence on the frozen barrier. Some experts predict a gradual shift toward permanent concrete structures once the most hazardous fuel is removed. Confidence level, medium. Political and financial pressures will influence this decision as much as engineering data. The long-term scenario depends on factors no one can fully predict: the stability of the reactor buildings, the behavior of melted fuel still buried underground, and whether climate change affects groundwater patterns. If the wall succeeds for 3 decades, it will be decommissioned as part of the site's final closure. If it fails catastrophically, Japan will face a contamination crisis that could dwarf the original disaster. Confidence level, low. No one wants to find out. The ice wall at Fukushima is a gamble frozen in time. A $300 million bet that human engineering can hold back the consequences of a technology we built, but couldn't fully control. It's working for now, but in a crisis measured in decades, for now is the only answer anyone can give. If this story left you thinking about the long shadow of nuclear accidents, watch our next video. Chernobyl's new safe confinement, the 1.7 billion tomb built to last 100 years. You'll see how 2 disasters, separated by decades and continents, forced engineers to build monuments to containment that may outlast the civilizations that created them. Source notes and disclaimer. This script draws from TEPCO public reports, Japanese government regulatory filings, IAEA expert assessments, and peer-reviewed research on groundwater remediation and nuclear decommissioning. Radiation levels and technical specifications were cross-referenced with independent monitoring data where available. The Fukushima situation remains active and new information may emerge. No financial or political affiliation influences this presentation. Viewer discretion is advised for discussions of industrial accidents and environmental contamination. If you found this story informative and well presented, please consider like the video and subscribing to the channel.